So David is here with us today, and there may be a few beauties also coming in along the way. We've recorded this. This is a really beautiful opportunity to hear from David about personal safety for women. And David has helped me do some of my own personal growth and development in that. And it's been such an empowering thing to be able to have in our toolbox of life skills and everything. So I wanted to, David offered to come in and share some of the most important things he's learned along the way to share with us. And I'm super, super happy that he's here with us. So without further ado, David, welcome.
Hi, everybody. Hi.
Hi.
Hey. I'm glad. It's good to see you, Jess.
Yeah, it's good to see you too.
Yeah.
I've made you the spotlight.
What's Spotlight?
Means you're front and center.
Oh, I'm still trying to figure out the technology. It makes me insane. But anyway, maybe we can go over that afterwards.
Yeah, totally. So during the height of all this chaos that's going on, you and I kind of discussed a few different things that could really help women feel empowered and, more in tune with their bodies and their own intuitions and everything like that. So, what would you say has kind of led you to this place of wanting to study this so deeply and to share it with women and everything?
Um, well, probably because I was beaten up as a kid a lot. So I kind of know what it was like to be bullied and picked on and stuff. And so I don't know. It's just always been a part of my wiring. Um, and I like women a lot. So, so yeah. Really, you know, personal safety and self-defense is not about a bunch of moves. It's really about reconnecting to our body in a primary and primal way. Um, it's yeah, that's what it is. It's using our body as an antenna to read situations. Things have been acculturated out of all of us, but particularly for women, because traditionally women have not been able to go head to head with men in terms of physical strength. So they've had to find other ways of navigating personal safety. But I always tell my students, if you've got a 90-pound Rottweiler growling at you, you're not going to worry about whether it's a male or a female.
Right.
You're going to be safe. Yeah. So yeah. Um, I don't know. Ask me questions. I'm not sure where to begin.
Yes, absolutely. So what kind of things have you studied? Because you've done self-defense and what form of self-defense that's been.
Okay,
And
so
yeah,
I've studied in terms of martial arts. I've done many. I'm not naturally talented. I've had to work hard at what I know and what I do, but I've studied Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, Muay Thai, Kali Eskrima, stick and knife fighting, Taekwondo, Kung Fu, a little bit of Sistema, a little bit of Tai Chi, and definitely some boxing. And I trained MMA for about a year. Um, but that self-defense is different than martial arts. Matter of fact, in some ways, they're polar opposites. There's two basic kinds of violence in the world. One is, Jess, would you unmute yourself?
yeah,
Thanks. Cool. I'd like us to be interacting. There's two kinds of violence, or violence is categorized into put into two categories. One is social violence and one is asocial violence.
mm,
Social violence is typically what men do to establish dominance, hierarchy, territory. Asocial violence is predatory violence, and it's primarily the violence that women are subjected to. It's not based on establishing territory and dominance. It's based on hunting, and the perspective of asocial violence is I'm not looking for a fight. I'm looking for a victim. I'm looking for prey.
mm, mm,
So asocial violence sees women as prey, and the dynamics of those kinds of violence are quite different. Um, so what we teach, or what I teach, and the people that I teach with, What we teach is we teach women how to navigate situations that might become asocial. So we spend a lot of time teaching de-escalation. Um, a rapist is just primarily a bully who's looking for a victim, as I said, and that bully is looking for weakness. And if he doesn't see the weakness, he'll move on. And that process of trying to find that weakness is called an interview. And this is an interview that you want to fail. So you don't want to be an easy target or a soft target or a good victim. So, um, and the way we teach this is by teaching. We all have a natural. All of us have ancestors who had who all of us had ancestors who fought and killed other human beings. And in order to do that, if they hadn't done that, we wouldn't be here. So we have a part of our biology, and it's not just men, women too. We have a part of our biology that we can access to read the environment, part of our neurology. So
Wow. It's hard to imagine that, but yeah, what the survival of the fittest and being able to fight and defend and survive. And you mentioned too, how women, like you said, we haven't been able to use force, so we've had to use manipulation, right?
right.
Different ways to navigate. When you told me about the conversation a couple of months ago, I was really blown away by it because it's so easy how they use our niceness against us,
Oh,
right?
the
Our
conversational cues, right, right.
yeah.
Well, so just something to think about. I always ask women in my classes, when you meet a guy who's creepy, and all the women nod their heads. And what I say is, well, he is creepy. You're right. He is absolutely creepy. And the part of you that knows he's creepy is the same part of you that can listen to a plant or understand what a baby needs, and can navigate a dangerous situation. That part of you is alive, and you're born with it, and it's birthright. So our job is to teach us, me also, but teach all of us to listen to that part more, to make that voice stronger, so that we're not there when trouble happens. We can see trouble coming, and we can be not be there when it happens.
I know that for a lot of us women, we get ridiculed or accused of being too paranoid or too sensitive, or you're just making things up, or he's not a bad guy, or whatever it is. And it's this constant thwarting and diminishment of our own internal guidance system of
Exactly.
something that doesn't feel good, but because I don't have evidence to prove such, then I must be erratic or crazy, or all of those things.
And those are exactly the things that a predator will look for. So in the interview, and if a predator, if you show convicted rapists images of people walking down the street, they all pick the same person they would attack. They pick the same people because they're reading body language, and they're looking for a person, a woman who's going to second guess herself, is going to doubt her instincts, who may question her own perceptions, her own direct perception. So when you get that alarm bell going off in your body, you should listen to it. And it doesn't, we always say that your safety is always more important than somebody else's feelings. Always. So if you need to insult somebody, or if you're wrong, be wrong, but be safe. And if you hurt somebody's feelings, hurt their feelings.
I've had a situation like that before where I put someone else's feelings over my own, not so much safety, but just owning my own truth. And so like to hearing that, it's like something that almost we need to like hear on repeat, reinforce like in our sleep for like days on end, that like my safety is more important than your feelings. My safety is more important than your feelings.
Exactly. Exactly. And my guess is, I mean, some of us are traumatized, and then we might have more alarm bells going off more often than others. But my guess is, for most normal people, I would guess a good 70 to 90% of the time when our alarm bells go off, they're real. We're reading something, and we ignore that at our peril. You had mentioned the conversational red flags. Those are from Gavin de Becker's book, The Gift of Fear. which I would highly recommend. There's two books I would really highly recommend. One is the Gift of Fear by Gavin de Becker, and the other one is called Strong on Defense by Sanford Strong. And those are the two main books we use in our courses. I was trained in a something called fast defense, which is high adrenaline, full force self-defense, which came out of something called model mugging, role model mugging, which was created by a man named Matt Thomas. And yeah, so it's very, very, the work is fascinating, and there's a whole other level besides martial arts. It's not even in the same universe as martial arts. It's
Mm.
about reading an environment using large muscle groups, full force techniques. Well, first, it's about de-escalating. So we teach people to de-escalate dangerous situations, because violence should always be your last choice. But as Tim Larkin says, when it is your last choice, it is then your only choice.
Yeah.
So, and our birthright as mammals is to be able to defend ourselves. And we don't, learning to defend ourselves does not attract violence. It actually does the opposite. It keeps us safer.
Mm.
We're in denial. We're not going to see, if we don't believe in trains, we're not going to see that train coming on the track.
Right.
So, fire, we say, fire extinguishers don't attract fires.
That's right.
Seatbelts don't cause car accidents, so.
That's
And
right.
even more importantly than that, even more importantly than personal safety, um, it's the reclamation of our somatic bodies. We're reclaiming our bodies. We disassociate from trauma,
Mm.
so we reclaim that. We reclaim those our bodies, and in that we reclaim our core nature, which I think is a really important part of psychology.
Can you explain or describe what somatic work is?
Yeah, somatic work is just basically paying attention to what's happening within our body. The technical term for that is interoception. So we're listening to the subtle feelings in our body. So if I have an emotion, what does that emotion feel like in my body? If I'm meeting somebody, what is happening in my body as I'm talking to that person? When I get triggered, what is that about? And we're conditioned, particularly in Western society, not to do that, not to embody, not to, we live in our head. We live like a few feet from our body. We don't live in our bodies. And that reclamation for me has been profound. And for women too. And, we've, the system the system and the original system it came from, we've trained 15,000 women over the past 40 years. I'm not sure how long. And they're the what we do is we recreate. So trauma is always created in a high adrenaline state, as far as I know. Trauma is created in a high adrenaline state. The amygdala activates. The amygdala says to the hippocampus, listen to this. This is important. This is important. Hippocampus grabs it, and then and if it becomes trauma, it becomes a deeper imprint into the body. So one of the ways of addressing trauma is to create a parasympathetic state with people and having them relax, meditate, because people who have been traumatized are hypervigilant, right? So we can do that. We can meditate, hypnosis, sometimes medications. I'll give people medications to calm them down. Sometimes that works, but sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes people who've been re-traumatized, who've been traumatized, cannot handle that. They can't meditate. It makes their condition worse. What we do is kind of the opposite. We recreate that high adrenaline state in sacred space, in a safe, sacred space. And within that space, we give the body a new outcome from the trauma. So if somebody's been assaulted, we will recreate the scenario. We bring them up into that high adrenaline state, but then their body finds another way out of it, because the trauma is kind of trauma mostly happens during some kind of immobility.
Mm.
Trauma
Yep.
is typically when we cannot physically move, that's what can create the trauma. So we allow the body to move while in the high adrenaline state and recreating the scenario, and that it does it really it helps a lot of people, so that trauma is no longer driving the bus. It's always there, but it's no longer driving the bus.
I know those states of it, like that fight, flight, freeze,
Exactly.
like that flash. Like I'm very aware of that in my body. That flash of panic,
Right.
and it
Right.
like the floods my body. And it's interesting because it's not necessary. It could be from upsetting a boss. You know, it could be from, you know, like the things that it's not from being in a personally physical aggressive situation, you
Hmm.
know. So how trauma shows up in our day-to-day life, and what triggers us and how we get activated, and then it's like not being able to think. And it's such an interesting space of getting back into the body instead of dissociating or freezing, you know. And I think you said too, freeze, in one of our conversations, that freeze is the woman's common um, way
Yeah.
of responding.
Yeah, it is. I have a request to make, and you can edit this out later. Would you share screen so we bounce back and forth?
Share screen. Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, so what we do is we train women to bypass the freeze response, and we do it neurologically. So what we're doing is we recreate the high adrenaline state, and we build them up to a point where they learn they can the adrenaline does interesting things to us. It gives us tunnel vision, where we lose our peripheral vision. It distorts time. It's called tachypsyche or time distortion. We lose we have auditory exclusion. We cannot hear, and we lose fine motor control. And this is an adaptive, evolutionary adaptive mechanism that we have as mammals. This is how,
Mm.
this is how we evolved. Because if we play dead and something's attacking us, sometimes we'll survive. So that was imprinted in our genes, and then we do that. However, that can also be destructive, because oftentimes a predator will look for a human predator will look for that freeze response. So what we'll do is we recreate the scenario in high adrenaline state, but we train their body to move in large muscle groups through the adrenaline. So rather than the adrenaline causing people to freeze, it gives them fuel to move. It makes them stronger and faster.
Yeah. I remember the training that I had, and how the yellow situation, because it was like yellow, orange, red, black, I think. And like how I was at yellow and I wanted to immediately take it to red. And then when I was in a red state, I was like, totally, that was a huge wake up for me, that when I was in a red state, which should have been like go time, like scream, like that I shut down. And that
Right,
was super,
right.
super interesting for me to like see that in that highest state, that was the one that I de-escalated instead of ramped up. So
Right, right. Yeah, and to be clear, so the we classify states of the body. They're actually, we feel them in our bodies, but they're levels of danger or levels of the perception of danger. So the levels are white, yellow, orange, red, and black. We also have one called green, which is faint compliance. But white is basically you're at home reading a book. You're not aware of your environment. You're reading a book or watching television or whatever. Yellow is situational awareness, just basic mindfulness. It's like yellow is a state that you're in when you're meditating. You're just present and aware. And as Rory Miller says, there's no downside to being aware. There's no downside to being present. So yellow is just basic awareness. Orange is, there's something wrong here. Something is off. That we call baseline is off. There's something, you meet a guy and something just doesn't feel quite right. Red is there's actual danger. There's actual danger. And then black is physical violence. You're in it, doing it. So, so in each of these states has a neurological component. So when we're in orange, well, there's something wrong here, you know. If we're in red, it's we're ready for black. We are ready. And unless this situation changes right now, there's going to be physical violence. Right? And then black is physical violence. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah.
And so
Um,
we train in the, I have a suit I wear. So once we get into the physical violence part, I have this suit that protects me. And we train people to use full force techniques, large muscle movements, very simple full force techniques. And I don't stop in the suit until I feel something that would be a knockout blow. So I have to feel in the suit, oh, that would be something that would knock me out. And then I stop. And we start people off very slowly. It's a very supportive environment. And we slowly increase it until it's that, I believe, puts it into muscle memory. We've had cases of women 20, 30 years after being assaulted who've successfully defended against physical violence. Um, Out of, I think, one of the guys that one of my mentors has tracked 230 or so women who've been physically assaulted that he's tracked. Out of them, all except 7 defeated their attacker within a minute or two, less than a minute, you know. And of the 7, none were killed that he knows of. He's not aware of anybody that was killed. So I don't know what that is. 223 and wins and 7 losses is pretty good odds. You know.
yeah. And that there was a story once of one woman being unconscious, right? And she like still sprang into
Yeah,
action.
she was. It was in. I think it was in San Francisco. It was during an earthquake. She was in an office, and I think a filing cabinet fell over and knocked her out. And when the paramedics came, they started using their scissors to take her clothes off, and she knocked both of them out. And they had to get new paramedics in there to deal with everybody. So yeah, yeah.
It's
There was
amazing.
a woman that Bill Kipp, one of my trainers. One of my one of the men that taught me. He talked about a woman that he taught in California who was in a wheelchair, and she was had her biggest fear was being assaulted in her wheelchair. So she was so he trained her, and then I think it was just a day of training, and she was home one day, and she was about to get into the bathtub, and somebody broke into the house, and he found she was on the edge of the bathtub, and she didn't know what to do, whether to get in the tub or out. So she got out of the tub, and then this man tried to assault her, and she knocked him out cold.
Wow,
Yeah, and called the police.
that's amazing.
So, yeah,
And how interesting that she had that intuition to want to learn that, you know, at the
yeah,
time.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
really interesting. I'm curious, I don't know, I'm not sure which way we can go towards some of the cues of the conversation or a couple of, like, I think the conversation.
We're kind of rambling, but that's fine. We can. You start a circle beginning anywhere, right?
You're right. Well, because I do think the conversation is important for women, especially for young women too, to like understand what are some of the cues of the
Oh,
people
okay.
that
Yeah,
like
let's go over
are
that.
trying to the interview.
The
Yeah.
interview, yeah. And just to be clear, this is not mine. This is Gavin de Becker's work. So if you want me to, do you want to read them, or do you want to make me host and I can share my screen?
Yes, I can definitely make you. I think I can make you co-host.
I didn't know there was a co-host. Cool.
There is a co-host.
Wow.
There you go.
That's how you do that. All
That's how
right.
you do it.
So I'm going to share my screen, and let's go here. See, I'm going to avoid things that are embarrassing. And I am.
I remember reading the interview, and I was one of the ones I felt like that had really happened to me was, just that nice guy predator. Just oh, it's really hard. The accusing of you know how was it worded? Something about what are you like some kind of bitch? Like what are you like?
Are you a lesbian? What are you, a dyke? Or yeah,
Yeah,
what
what are
are you
you?
prejudiced? Or what's the
Right.
matter? Don't you like my tattoos? I thought you were better than those other bitches.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Predatory conversations. Okay.
Here we
So these
go.
are conversational red flags. And again, these are Gavin de Becker's, are not mine. Discounted no. So when you say no, and a healthy male will always honor your no. And if they don't, you shouldn't be around them. And no is not the beginning of a negotiation. No is a complete sentence. Now, there's other issues around women and stuff like that where, and sexual dynamics where this can be this can go into different areas, but basically this needs to be your default, especially with somebody that you don't know. If you don't know this person, then if somebody discounts your no, you should immediately be suspect. Anybody that ignores a no, they might be just neurotic, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if they're neurotic or a serial predator. It just matters that you get the no is a no, and it's not the beginning of a negotiation. Typecasting is what Jess was talking about. Are you one of those paranoid types? What, are you too good to talk to someone like me? What's the matter? You prejudiced? I thought you weren't such a stuck-up bitch like the others. I thought you could see beyond my looks, tattoos, race, like that. Okay, that's called typecasting, and it's designed to get a woman on the defensive, so that she wants to prove that she's not one of those nasty people, that she's different.
Yeah.
Woofing is what we do. This is not Gavin de Becker's. Woofing is what we do in our classes, and we will insult people to get them adrenalized. It's a very safe environment, but yeah, that's the purpose. So it's called garbage mouth. It can also be help me, I'm hurt. There are serial killers that use that preyed on women's kindness in order to prey on women. Forced teaming is really interesting. Um, we can do this. How are we going to handle this? This is somebody that is a stranger. I mean, if it's your partner, then it's different. But if somebody is, we can do this. Oh, we can do this. That's called forced teaming, and that's a red flag. Uh, Charmed and nice, overly helpful and charismatic. Predators, when they're doing an interview, can be very charming,
Yep.
and particularly pedophiles. Pedophiles are incredibly, incredibly charming people because you have to be really charming to get children to have sex with you and to
Mm.
get them to keep a secret. So
Mm.
they're incredibly manipulative. So this is, and obviously, if somebody's just a nice person, that's fine. But you want to, if it feels off, assume it's off and take it from there. Too many details. This actually happened to my stepdaughter, or a woman, my girlfriend's daughter. Um, she was at a place on Maui, and this guy came up my girlfriend was parking, my former girlfriend. This guy came up in a golf cart, and he was, when she got out of her car after she had parked, he was driving away with her daughter. Her daughter got out in the car. She was going to go park in the golf cart. And she said, what were you doing? And he had gotten her into the golf cart and he was going off to his cabin. He said, oh, we're just going to take her up here. We're going to do this. And then, why don't you just go into the sauna and your daughter can stay with me for a while, right? That's two things happened. One is he basically was kidnapping the girl, manipulating the girl to get into the golf cart. And number two, he was giving too many details. Okay. So if somebody's giving you too many details about something, it's a red flag.
Mm.
Context. If you're with a stranger, and this is also ignoring your no, I asked him to leave twice. If you don't know somebody well and they seem a little too friendly, or if they try and isolate you, if you're in an isolated situation, that's a red flag. And remind me to go over human mating patterns, okay,
Okay.
before we stop. Um, so, yeah, if you ask somebody to leave, or you keep hinting, or you keep giving body language, and they're not acknowledging it, that's a red flag. Loan sharking. Loan sharking is when a predator does you a favor. So he's, let me help you carry your bags. Um, yeah, let me help you carry your bags or change a tire. This is, and he may use force seeming. We can do this. Or you think may, if you say no, he may typecast. What are you, some kind of bitch? What's your fucking problem, right? So it's very manipulative. Unsolicited promise. Um, I'll just go in and put those bags down. I promise. That's a red flag. Hurting is when you're outside, men or groups of people are forcing you into an area. That's very common in physical assaults, that people will try to be forced into an alley or a corner or whatever. Ignoring personal space. There's no need for him to get too close to you. If he wants the time of directions, he can ask just as easy from 8 feet away. He doesn't need to be close. So if somebody is starting to impinge in your space, that's a red flag. And you can even say, that's close enough, and that's fine. That's close enough. So, and what most of these are going to come up with, or a lot of these, there's going to be what we call orange. That's when where there's something wrong here. There's something wrong. And that's your mammalian instinct kicking in. Um, Body language. Oh, so I want to talk about, and this is mostly for young women, but this is from Desmond Morris and Mark McYoung. Um, Human mating progresses in a specific sequence, and this is true of all societies. First, there's eye to body, so you look at somebody catches your eye, you connect. Then there's eye contact. Sometimes the female will do preening gestures. Um, then you start talking to somebody that you like. Then there'll be physical contact, usually initiated by the female, on a neutral part of the body, a hand or a shoulder, or proximity. A woman will sit closer to a man or somebody that she's interested in. Obviously, this is not just men and women, this is women and women, or men and men too, but these patterns are pretty consistent throughout all over the world. So up until that point, these are all done in public. These can be done in public. These are okay. These are not necessarily done in isolation in human mating. From this point on here, these are going to move more and more towards isolation, physical isolation, where you're alone with somebody. Okay, people people rarely have sex in the streets, right? So you're moving towards an isolated place, and this is specific to humans too. Other animals do not necessarily isolate when they're mating. Um, so then arm to shoulder, then arm to waist, then kissing, and um, and then touching the face, and then you get into more direct sexual contact. Foreplay, hand to genitals, mouth to breast, intercourse. Okay, that's typically how it works. Well, this is universal. So this pattern, and young women may not understand this. So if you've got some guy who's not well put together, and he's at a party, and people have been drinking, and he's at a party, and a young woman finds herself alone in a room, or a bedroom specifically, with somebody that she does not intend to have sex with, she should leave the room.
Yeah.
Okay. Now you can say, whatever. I mean, there's all this talk about, we shouldn't need to teach women how to defend themselves. We should teach men not to rape. And I have no idea how to teach men not to rape, but I'm open to suggestions. But until that day comes when we can teach all the men not to assault women, we need to teach this. But she needs to understand that, and guys being quite dense, if a guy have been drinking, he's alone in a room with a woman, and he thinks she's cueing him, that she's interested in him, and if she rejects him after it gets out of control, it could just make him pissed. It could just piss him off, and he's going to feel like he was led on. She didn't know that. She didn't know that's how human mating happens. So anyway, the point is, young women should know, if that's the case, that she should just say, let's go back into the party, or I need to go check the time, or I need to go see my friends, or I need to go say, whatever. But the isolation is what you want to watch out for, because the isolation is what creates danger. People
Yeah.
don't sexually assault people in public. I'm sorry, go on.
No, I was just going to reinforce. So, like, the bottom line is for women to understand that universally it is understood in our biology that if, in psychology maybe, that like if you go into a private room with a male, there is an understanding that there will be some kind of sexual component there in their mind. Like it's almost, would you say
Implied.
unconscious? Yeah,
Right.
implied.
Yeah. 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 So that's important to know. Like I say, especially for young women. Um, yeah. And
I've done it for me. I've done it with me. Like I've trusted a man and been like, oh, let's, and he's like, oh, let's come up to my room and keep talking, because it's really loud down here. And I'm like, yeah, okay, yeah, that sounds good. And then I get in there and I'm like, oh, actually, that's not what's happening.
right,
Oh, I got
right.
myself
It's
here.
going to be misinterpreted. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
Um,
Yes.
I love those quotes. The loan sharking thing is so prevalent. The man doing a favor and you feel obligated because they've done something nice. That to
Yeah,
me
and
is
men are hardwired to provide. At least that's my hallucination. That we love, if not hardwired, we're softwired. We love to provide, So it could be totally innocent, but it could also be predatory and quite dangerous.
yeah. There was a big statistic you told me about rape. It was like 90% of rapes happen something. Remember that? There's like a statistic that you shared. Don't mean to put you
Oh,
on
I think it
the spot.
was 70% or 80%. I don't remember, but a really high percentage of sexual assaults are committed without physical violence. In other words, the assault happens with verbal intimidation alone. So women are, I think it was 70% or 80, some large percentage of sexual assaults happen without being hit. In other words, it's just woofing. It's just a garbage mouth. And yeah, somebody raised their hand. You can.
Maria? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was me. I have a question to that, to the statistic, or just in general. Um, does height matter, or how the woman looks? Because like I found that especially the boys in my friend, they I'm really small, like I'm 1 meter 50, and the boys are really caring for me, and the girls that are bigger than me, they're just looking at them and they're like, okay, she can care for herself. But for me, they're always like, no, no, we will do it for you. And yeah.
Well, I think the question. I'm not really understanding what you're saying, but what I think is that if you want help, then that's fine. If you don't want help, then just say no.
Yeah, no, of course. But like, is there a statistic where you can find that women that are assaulted are smaller or taller, or does how
Oh,
she looks, does it
no,
matter?
not that I'm aware of. What's more, no, women that are assaulted, though, typically are the vast majority of sexual assaults are between like 16 and 22 or something. So it's more
Okay,
about age than about size.
okay,
Yeah, as far as I know. And again, so these predators are pre-qualifying the women. They're not going to assault somebody they think is. They're not going to assault somebody if they think they might get hurt, right? Because they're bullies. They don't want to fight. So they're looking for somebody vulnerable that they can target. I'm not sure. The physical size may have something to do with that, but I think much less so than certainly age and like in our classes, women, we teach women to respond verbally, and some of those women, oh my God, I mean, one of our instructors, my former partners, she's tiny, you know, and she'll beat the crap out of you. Another one of our instructors is not much bigger than her, and she was She was down at the beach here, and this guy came up and punched her in the stomach, and she put him in the hospital. So it's much more about the way we carry ourselves than about our physical size.
Mm. Mm. I can see that.
And yeah, like women, when women in our classes, sometimes those women will yell, and my balls will shrink. I'll be like, holy fuck, I am not getting near that woman, right? Because that is, that's a pit bull. That's not something I want to get close to. We always say in our classes, big strong guy, he's really intimidated. Throw a cat on him, see what happens. Right? Just throw a cat in his face. See how he does with that. So you're that cat.
Yeah, it's our voice, and that's the thing, right? That's what I was so thrown by with the number of assaults. There was just there was no physical,
Right. No
any
hitting. Right.
physical manipulation. It was just through their voice only. And so for me, I've been the last couple of weeks been really encouraging all of us to open our throat chakras and speak our truths and get used to it. And, like saying maybe the uncomfortable or the ugly things or whatever it is, just to it's safe. It's important, to do that, to exercise our voice.
Absolutely. And connect that to the pelvic floor too.
Mm.
Because we have blocks in our bodies. And when that's connected, because a woman's power comes from her pelvis, traditionally. I'm not, and so that power is the power to create and the power to destroy, and when you source from your pelvis, you're sourcing from I believe, one's deeper intuition, the belly, pelvis. Yeah.
Is there, I don't know if we can go into this. I really liked you teaching me about breaking the pelvic bone.
Mm-hmm.
And, so we've been taught, in society to aim for the balls, if we're gonna go in, but it was actually much deeper, right? So,
Yeah.
and I
You
don't know how to explain that.
Yeah. We teach specific techniques in specific situations. So pain compliance is not a good way to address an assault. In other words, just hurting somebody will not necessarily prevent an assault. You have to stop them. You have to stop them from assault, physically stop them, because people can fight through pain. Pain does not always work to stop an assault. So we're not talking about putting a knee into someone's balls. We're talking about basically breaking the pelvic diaphragm. And it's just about stopping the assault. That's all we want to do. This is not revenge. We're not trying to necessarily hurt anybody. We're trying to stop an assault. And whatever it takes to do that, we want to do. And that keeps us both morally and legally safe, if that is the case, Yeah.
Yes, legally safe.
Yeah. Because you don't want to train self-defense and then end up in prison. That's not going to work.
Mm-mm.
It wouldn't keep you safe.
So you mentioned our body awareness as a thermometer when we were chatting the other day, and using our body as an antenna. So that level of apprehension, that spidey sense that something's off, like in a situation or talking to someone. Because I know there's verbal cues of things that we can say. I'm just wondering if there's a couple of things that you're able to share if we're in a situation where that spidey, that apprehension's up and we know it. What are a couple of things that maybe they could be empowered to use in that situation?
Yeah, the first thing is to obviously to not be there. So to leave the situation. So I was in a movie theater about a year and a half ago. It was a matinee. It was about 2 in the afternoon. There was only a few people in the theater, and I was watching some movie. And I'm sitting there, and this guy walked in, and immediately my antenna went up around him. I felt like something was wrong. And then he came and he sat behind me, a couple of rows behind me on the edge of the row. And I sat there and I'm feeling and I'm feeling and I'm thinking, this doesn't feel right. There's something about this that feels wrong. And I'm sitting there and I'm sitting there. And finally, after a minute or two, I said, I'm not I'm not going to sit here and have to worry about this guy. So I got up and I left. I left the movie. I just walked out of the theater. So when I was driving home from the theater, I thought, oh, I know what happened. That guy had snuck in from another theater in the same complex. So he was nervous. And I was picking up on that nervousness because he walked in like 20 minutes after the movie started. And I went, oh, right. So if you're in a situation where it feels off, don't be there. Leave, you know, just don't be there. Cross the street or leave the party or whatever, you know. Um, if if you're in orange and it starts getting closer to red, like there may be danger, you need to just basically stand your ground without blaming. So you don't want to call people names. You don't want to say, fuck you, asshole, get the fuck away from me. You're drawing a line in the sand. Leave me alone. Leave me alone. Now. Leave me alone. Stay away from me. That's close enough. Hear that my voice goes down into my belly, right? And then that'll bring you through the stages. And then without actually going into an actual class, I don't think I can do that. But basically you're basically drawing a line in the sand. Now, this is tricky because you in a situation, if you can leave, you leave, but you don't want to bolt and run because that can trigger a predatory instinct. Like if a cat and a dog are squared off and the cat takes off, the dog will just go, even if it doesn't even before it knows what happens, it just goes. So this is a very delicate thing. Yeah, so that's just some guidelines around that. If you are in a one of the things we talk about in our classes is you never, ever, ever get in a vehicle with somebody that you don't want to get in the vehicle, ever. So even if somebody has a gun to your head, don't get in the car, run. If you run from somebody with a handgun, and bad guys are notoriously bad shots, if you run from somebody with a handgun, you have a 10% chance of being hit and a 1% chance of being killed. Okay. There's nothing you can put on your body or hold in your hands that's worth getting raped over. Nothing. So if he wants your wallet, he wants whatever. That's a kind of predatory behavior, but it's not necessarily going to turn into asocial violence. But so if somebody has a gun to your head, tells you to get into a car, run. If he grabs you by the jacket, get rid of the jacket and run. You know, if you are abducted in a car, crash it. You want to crash that car into a place that's preferably where there's a lot of people around, but you do not want to be taken to crime scene B. And you never want to be tied up. So these are just some ideas. I know it's hard for me to even talk about this, but these are just some ideas around that.
Yeah. It is hard, but it's important to know. And I remember growing up, I would play worst case scenarios in my head. This happened, what would I do? If this happened, what would I do? What would I do? What would I do? And
it's called fear setting. Do you know that's a technique?
No.
A stoic technique called fear setting. Yeah.
Fear setting. Right
Yeah.
on. Being stoic at such a young age. But you know, I think part of it was because I have tended to be a very trusting person, right? So like if I'm a trusting person or people have said I'm naive or, you know, maybe I'm not picking up on cues. So then it's like, okay, if I get into a sticky situation, you know, what am I going to do? And there's only been a couple of times where I've gotten out of a situation, or it wasn't even a situation, but I got out of the environment afterwards and I was like, probably not a good idea that I was there. Probably not. And I got lucky. But it's tricky. It's tricky for women. Like, you know, we have so many social biases towards us and judgments and criticisms and, you know, how to be an empowered woman and is it okay to be, you know, a bitch and to hurt somebody's feelings and some guy who could be a totally nice guy. But I mean, this whole thing sprang from me sharing with David about a guy that I thought was a nice guy, and he actually ended up being probably some low level kind of predator. And that's why, we've had these conversations, because even super empowered women can still get into those situations because you're around a nice guy and you don't see it coming, and then you're in a really uncomfortable situation because you don't want to like upset the guy, right?
Yeah.
And it's really messed up.
So yeah, so it's always better not to be there when trouble happens. But yeah, yeah, and it's I mean, it's really disturbing. It's really disturbing stuff. And um, the the nice thing about this work is it actually is not only is about defending yourself against violence, but it's about reclaiming our bodies and our nervous systems.
Yeah. So somatic work is like, again, like getting back into our nervous systems and in our bodies and bringing it, like if we get into a high anxious state, is there like a breathing technique or something that you recommend to help us regulate our systems back down, even if it's not about danger, but more about the climate right now of just how chaotic everything is and uncertain and all that stuff? Is there something you
Yeah,
can?
absolutely. So in our classes, so the way we teach people to not freeze is we create the adrenaline state, and then and there's very specific techniques we use in the classes. The classes are designed very specifically to do this. But then we teach people to go into their frontal lobe, so the adrenaline's still there, but they're also using their thinking mind, which is going to prevent them from freezing. Okay, and they also helps them if you're fully adrenalized, you have tunnel vision. But if you're down a little bit, if you're not fully adrenalized, but you're adrenalized, your peripheral vision opens up and you see more. Right. So any basically belly breathing is going to reduce the amount of adrenaline. It's going to bring us more into our frontal lobes. Um, in our, we used to train some of our instructors, and we would train them to we'd have scenarios where they're adrenalized, and then we'd have somebody off the side hold up like a knife or a fork. Which is it? And then in the scenario, they have to figure out whether that's a knife or a fork. So they're forcing them to use peripheral vision. You know. So, but basically, the best thing to do is to belly breathe in any situation. And you can also do breath retention is not a great idea in self-defense scenarios, although some people do it, but I don't think it's good because people tend to hold their breath when they're stressed. But there are things called square breathing where you hold your breath for 4 beats, you exhale for 4 beats, hold your breath for 4 beats, inhale for 4 beats. That's another thing you can do. And some soldiers, special forces soldiers, will do that in combat so that they keep they're adrenalized, but they're not fully adrenalized. They're not into panic mode. So, and by training people to use their bodies in adrenaline and doing the right thing, it just helps. Yeah, it helps the situation, but it also helps them to. Because my hallucination is that navigating our nervous system is a good 70 to 80% of the important of what it means to be alive. If we can navigate our nervous system, we can do a really good job in our lives in general.
Mm. One of my things I love, when David and I communicate and do check-ins, is that we scan our bodies. What are we feeling? Like, is there a tenseness here? Is there a spark here? Is there a heat here? And that felt sense, that awareness of the body is really helpful. Because we tend to ignore it, override it, things like that. And so I've been doing that more and more, where I do a body scan. Like as I'm talking to someone, I'm like, okay, what's my body saying? How is it responding? And like paying attention without making it the foregone conclusion, but to at least have the awareness of what's going on in my body.
When women, especially when young girls are molested, my observation is that they'll tend to one of two things will tend to happen. Either they will globalize their sexuality, they become promiscuous, or they will completely shut down and become asexual. And my observation is that the women that have globalized, have been traumatized and globalized their sexuality will tend to go to the sacred sexuality classes, and that the women that have shut down will tend to go into the self-defense classes. I don't know if that's true, but that's just my observation. But the point is that the powerful thing in those is the transformation of the body. You know, you can do cognitive behavioral therapy for a long time with somebody who has PTSD and nothing really changes because you can't think your way out of the situations. You can, but it's a lot more difficult. I think so. When Jess and I pay attention to our bodies, we're conditioning ourselves to create somatic transformation almost unconsciously and automatically. And it gives us much more tools because we have access to the place the trauma has happened or the nervousness has happened or the adrenaline is happening, which is in our bodies.
Mm. Well, I know since doing the work that I have with you, I'm not nearly as jumpy or thrown into a state of panic or trauma that would happen pretty regularly, you know, and still get activated on a really only a couple of times, which has been awesome. Because if there was a state of if someone's unhappy with me, I'm in trouble, and I mean I'm in danger trouble, you know, like so it's amazing how trauma can show up in our lives and from what age and how it still shows up over and over and over. But you know, definitely doing the work and the conversations and learning about the interview and you know these different techniques, it's changed my life, and I'm so grateful for
You know, it's
you.
funny. A friend of mine called me the other day, and I'm 64, and he's like 69, maybe 70. And I texted him. I said, "Please call me." And he said, "You know, whenever somebody says that to me, I feel like I'm a bad boy and I've done something wrong, right? Like, right? It's like I know that, like, bad dog, bad dog, bad dog, right? Like you said, somebody's unhappy with you. It's like, oh my God, I've suddenly become a little kid.
Yeah, we go back into that state, or I have, you know, and so to like breathe, like you said, and being aware of what's going on in my body and being like, okay, like, you know, and having the present awareness of it gives us the opportunity to make a new choice, right? And, but, you know, there's times where it's like you don't think straight. It's like, it just,
Right. And you know, so like, so if I'm feeling like I'm a bad dog, bad dog, bad dog, right? I'm not claiming my sovereignty, right? This work is all about personal sovereignty and recognizing the sovereignty of others. So if I'm feeling like, oh my God, what have I done wrong? Oh shit, you know, I'm like that. I'm actually not in my sovereignty. But if I bring my awareness down into my belly and I just feel my sovereignty, it takes the spark out of that. It takes the energy out of that fear because Christ, I'm 64 years old. What are they going to do? Tell my mom? You know, fuck. Right?
yeah,
And
it
if
doesn't have
I'm,
to make
oh,
sense,
I'm
but
sorry, go on, go on.
it doesn't have to make sense, right? Like there
Right.
doesn't have to be logic in it. It's just our
And
body.
if I'm adrenalized, I use adrenaline. If I'm feeling triggered and I'm adrenalized and I'm not being physically threatened, that to me points to a scripting, a piece of shadow that's in myself.
Mm.
Anytime I feel adrenaline and I'm not being physically threatened, like I'm not in a situation where there might be physical violence, okay, to me that's shadow. It's like, okay, what's going on in me? So if I'm home and I'm thinking about something that triggers me, if I drop into my body, that adrenaline says, Dave, there's something here to look at. There's something in you want to pay attention to.
I love that. That's a good awareness. If you're not in physical danger and you're feeling that, yeah, the shadow for sure. That happened to me like last month. I got really triggered and I called up a girl, like one of my best friends who does shadow work. I'm like, all right, help me through this shadow thing because I cannot, like, I am so activated right now. And I'm not in danger. My physical safety is not in danger, but I got so activated. And yeah, it was strong
It's
when it,
great. Yeah, yeah, yeah. We can make our lives heaven or hell depending on how we navigate our nervous systems.
I have a question. Does adrenaline trigger panic attacks, or are
Oh,
they somehow
oh, it is. Yeah.
correlated?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. It's all adrenaline. Yeah. It's a panic attack is a hyperadrenaline state. Yeah.
Yeah, because I had them a couple of weeks ago, and I was just sitting there, and suddenly my heart started beating really fast, and I couldn't breathe.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And that is,
And I was just reading a book, so I was literally doing nothing.
you know, that's interesting. I almost guarantee there was something else going on in your mind or in your unconscious that was, because I don't know about always, but very often there's signs as we're getting close to a panic attack. There's signals, but like, and I've had panic attacks before, and we override them. We ignore the signals, and I think this is the opposite. This is paying attention to all those signals. Oh, maybe I need to take a walk, or I don't know. Maybe there was no warning, and it could have been your adrenal gland just went into some kind of spike for some reason. But usually there's signals that we're not catching that are leading us in that direction.
And if there is a panic attack, do you still recommend the belly breathing, going back to your
Oh, yeah,
breath?
absolutely. Or breath retention, the square breathing is really good for that. Yeah. And the good thing about a panic attack is, I mean, it feels like you're going mad, but it actually cannot hurt you. You know, it won't, it's not dangerous. You're not going to have a heart attack, especially at your age, you know? So, yeah. So like I had one in a statistics class years ago, and luckily I'd had one before, so I knew what it was. Otherwise, I would have thought I was losing my mind. And I just sat there, and I couldn't answer a question, so I just went through the test, found a question I knew I could answer, and then it went away. But it's a very frightening experience. It's terrifying, actually.
Do you have any other things you'd like to share, or is there an opportunity if we come up with questions that we can compile and send to you?
Yeah, I'm trying to think. That covers a lot of it. Yeah, I mean, the most important piece of all this is being what they call situational awareness. It's kind of a cliche now, but it's just being aware, and there's no downside to mindfulness, you know. And I mean, this is something that there's a lot of medical research on mindfulness that is quite profound, but this mindfulness, it feels like we just call self-defense Buddhism with boundaries. It's all it is. So it feels like a lot of work to be constantly aware, but I think it's the opposite. I think we're constantly going into thought and story and shadow and stuff. That's actually exhausting, you know. And being present. At first, it can feel like it's exhausting, but I think it's liberating ultimately. So really, the two things I would leave you with are just trusting your instincts, trusting that feeling in your belly about somebody or a situation, and yeah, and presence.
That's great. Thank you so much, David. I love having you on here.
Thank you. I love being loved.
Uh, Nancy, Maria, if either of you would like to share anything, you're certainly welcome to.
Yeah, thank you very much. It was really interesting.
Great. Glad you enjoyed it. Cool.
Thank you, Maria. So late, all the way in Vienna. It's amazing. Austria.
Yeah,
Austria.
yeah. That's why I also have the accent when I talk English.
I love it. Nancy, did you have anything you wanted to share? Oh, can't hear you. Can't hear you, Nancy.
Oh, I'm looking for my question. I wrote it down and now I can't find it.
Oh, you have a question.
So I'm looking for it. Okay. I think you answered it in the in those typecasting and force teaming and all those ones that you gave me. I think it was answered in there. It was absolutely.
Okay, let's I want to give a plug before we leave. I want to give a plug for these books. See if they're on Amazon here. So this is The Gift of Fear by Gavin de Becker. Just a really remarkable book. This book is about how not to be there when trouble happens. Okay. And then Strong on Defense, the other one that we really recommend, is about what to do if you are there when trouble happens. So anyway, yeah, those are just highly recommended. And this one particularly is quite difficult to read. It's not an easy read because it's very unpleasant, because he gives descriptions of things that have happened to people. But it's brilliant and really worth navigating. So thank you, Jess.
Yes, thank you so much. More to come, I'm sure. And you're such a gift. I appreciate all that you do to help us all, in our empowerment and in our thriving, especially during this time. And I think what I'm walking away with most is belly breathing. If I'm starting to feel panicked, go to my belly, and use my voice, use our voice. You have full permission to be bitches.
Absolutely. Yeah. Embrace your inner bitch.
Embrace it. Yes. Well, thank you all so much. And I look forward to seeing you all soon.